Here we go. Okay, welcome to another interview. This time, I'm interviewing Dawn Mast, and she teaches in West Ottawa Public Schools. And I know Dawn through a couple different avenues. One, I taught with her husband for 11 years at Wyoming Park High School. He teaches science. He is now at the high school in my district while I'm at the junior high. But the real reason I know Dawn is that she was a Media Center parapro for, was it 1 year or 2?
At the secondary level for 2 years.
Okay, yeah. So she was in our
level for longer than that.
Yeah, so she was in our junior high Media Center for 2 years, and I got to know her really well. And she was just we were so sad when she was gone, because she was an excellent para. And so that's how I know her. And then I've kept up with her through social media as she went into teaching, and she just does really great things. So I was really excited that she agreed to do this with us. All right. So Dawn, the number one thing that I always ask, because all of my students, there's various questions about it, is how long have you been teaching and how did you get into teaching?
So I have kind of a zigzaggy path to where I am right now. I always wanted to be a teacher. I grew up with in a home where there was some trauma that was happening. And I always felt like school was my safe place and my safe thing. And I used to teach my brother in the basement for hours on end and set up a library there and everything. So I always really wanted to teach. When I went to college, the college that I went to only would certify secondary ed. So I actually left Kalamazoo College with a secondary teaching degree in German and social studies, which I don't know if you even knew that, but
I didn't know that.
And then I lived in Germany for a year after I graduated, and I came back and met my husband, and we got married, and he got the job in Wyoming, and I knew I was going to stay home with kids, and that kids were pretty shortly around the corner. So I just started looking for some way to be involved in education, but still be easy for me to leave and not be letting anybody down when I left. And so through Troy, I was able to become a parapro in Wyoming before we had kids. And I actually worked at the elementary level in Wyoming, starting in the EI program. And then I taught at the old Huntington Woods for a little while as a parapro. And then I had my kids and stayed home for a number of years. Then when they started school, I started subbing, got rehired in Wyoming as a media center parapro for the elementary level, and did that for quite a while, and then up to you guys. And then I went to resource room in Wyoming. And at that point in resource room, my wonderful teaching partner, Linda Failing, said, "You're wasting yourself as a parapro. Go back to school and get your elementary cert." So I did. I went back and got my elementary cert, and long-term subbed in Coopersville for a year, and then moved on to West Ottawa. And I teach at Pine Creek Elementary there, which is a school very similar to Wyoming, where I used to work. Very diverse student population in our building. A lot of immigrant families and a lot of English language learners in my building. So, and I love it. Took me a long time to get where I am, but now I'm certified K-12, and I just love it. So.
Not that you have a burning desire to go up to the grade 6 and older. Would you teach social studies or German, or would you prefer to stay?
I've talked to, I also am kind of a person who likes a new challenge pretty regularly. So if I ever feel like, I'm getting too stagnant as a 5th grade teacher, I would love to go up and teach social studies. There's things about secondary ed that are really fun. Mm-hmm. At elementary, you get one crack at a lesson and then it's gone. and you have to wait till the next year to try it over again, or give up a day somewhere to reteach. But at the secondary level, if something doesn't go well in first hour, you can kind of regroup and perfect it by the end of the day. And I did really enjoy that when I taught secondary.
Yeah. That's interesting. I did not know that you had the social studies in German. I knew, I think that I knew, well, I met you personally once you were at Wyoming, like, or once you were at the secondary in Wyoming, but I knew that you were in the elementary. So, I mean, I knew you worked for the district for a while, but I didn't know
Yeah,
that you had,
I've dabbled in a lot of different areas.
I mean,
The
I think
advantage
that's,
of that is when I really started my own classroom, I had had a multitude of mentors in my life and been able to see a lot of people teach.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of different, yeah, that's really good. So, what does a typical day in your classroom look like?
So I'm self-contained. I teach every subject, and I try really hard in my classroom to make what we do really meaningful for the kids. We start our day with just some quiet handwriting. Um, a lot of my students might have had a rough morning at home. And so we start with breakfast in our classroom and just a good 10 minutes of silence and doing kind of a mindless task. Then they go to their specials. So after we've hit the reset button on our day, they go to specials. And then when they come back, we have some MTSS for reading time. Then we go to math. Then I have, it's called language block, where our EL students go and get some additional support. And we have super late lunch. And then we come back and we have our literacy block until the end of the day. So I get a good solid 2 hours at the end of the day to do some really cool stuff with literacy at the end of the day.
Nice. Um, one, I'm trying to like, I try to like combine a couple of
Yeah.
the students' questions into one because there's so many and I can't get to all of them. Um, a few people asked about teaching in the upper elementary. What kinds of things do you do? Because you've got the kids where right around where they are is where some kids start to lose interest in school and it's not
Right.
fun anymore. And so a number of my students were wondering what kinds of things do you do in the upper levels to keep them engaged?
Well, first of all, you have to be an actor. Every day is a good day. Every day is a good day to be your best. I think just really setting at the beginning of the year a standard in your classroom, we're going to do our personal best all the time, is super important. But also, I really stress with my students, and I share a lot of the things that happened to me in my childhood. Like, it's okay to have a bad day, it's okay to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. Um, and just giving them agency to be their own learners. We talk at the beginning of the year a lot about goal setting. What do you want your learning to look like? And just fostering for them their own engagement in their learning, and having them be the own driver of their success. One way that I really kind of get a lot of buy-in for my students is I put that old media specialist hat on, and I've been really fortunate to get a lot of wonderful book donations for my classroom. And as I'm older, I'm able to personally supply a little bit more in my classroom. But maintaining a classroom library that reflects your student population is key. They need to know that you see them and hear them. And that has helped me so much. And just really, on the first day of school, I always tell people this, on the first day of school, when my students come, I get no say basically on who comes into my classroom. It's like that in most buildings. I do sometimes request siblings, and sometimes that's granted and sometimes not. But I always shut my door at the very first day, about an hour into the day, and I say, I got to shut the door. there's a big secret about our class that you don't know. And they're like, what, a secret? And I tell them, I picked you for my classroom. And you are in here because I wanted you in here. And that doesn't mean I don't like the other kids. It just means I went through the classroom and I built the best class that I could build. And we all need each other for a reason. And we go back and fall back on that a lot throughout the year. Like, I needed you in here as much as you need me, and together we're going to accomplish something. I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to work together. And the kids buy into that hard. It's a total lie. I don't pick them up. But it is true that we all need each other. And
Yeah.
I really foster that from the first day. And we always say, like, it's a big secret, and Mrs. Mast class is the best class in the building, and you got to pick us. And so just really, you need to build a relationship with the kids in any way that you can,
I
and that makes things a lot better.
I
It's
love that. You like brought tears to my eyes because I was like, oh, but it is true that I guess like I believe that the students are I have a post-it note on the front of my thing, two post-it notes, one that says behavior is communication,
yeah,
be curious, and another one that says they're in here for a reason. And
yeah,
I just assume that every child who ends up in my class is in my class because they needed me as a teacher,
right.
and I needed them as a student to teach me something. So I really,
Exactly.
but I've never like articulated that as well as you did by saying that to the students. Like
Yeah,
that's got to be huge for them to feel like Mrs. Mast knows who I am and wants me here.
yeah.
That's really
And
awesome.
I think that's really important. And I think the other thing that I would say is really important, and I know you would agree with this too, is a lot of kids never hear an adult apologize to them
Mhm.
for making a mistake. And I do make a huge deal out of that. I still make mistakes all the time, and I will apologize to kids in front of the whole class. And just the other day, I called a student by the wrong name. I cannot get into my head what his name is, and I keep calling him by the wrong name. And I apologized to him, and he said, "Mrs. Mass, it's okay." And I said, "No, it's not okay." And I said, "I don't know if you've ever had a grown-up apologize to you before." And he said, "No." And I said, "It's not okay for me to call you by the wrong name. But if you forgive me, that would mean a lot to me, and I'll try to do better." And just really fostering with kids, like, they need the same treatment that we expect for ourselves, and that gets reflected back. And until I have that relationship with a student, they won't work hard. And the relationships have to come first, and then they'll work hard for you.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I had the same thing. I had a girl, I kept calling her Ashley, and that was not her name. Her name started with an A, but it wasn't Ashley. And I said to her, I am so sorry I keep calling you Ashley. She kind of looks like my sister-in-law, and my sister-in-law's name is Ashley. And she's like, it's really fine. I said, it is not fine. It is never fine for someone to call you repeatedly by the wrong name. I'm like, I'm glad that you can give me the grace to learn it, but you should never be okay with someone calling you the wrong name.
Mhm.
And I think
Exactly.
that makes them we make a big deal about names at the beginning of the year. It's our
Mhm.
first like we research our name, we ask questions about where it came from, and we talk about how important it is to be called our correct name. So I like that. I like that you mentioned that. Man, you touched on a lot of things that people had questions on. So that's awesome because you're making my job easy. Um, so somebody else asked about Wasadwa and the ELL or I should probably say for anyone who doesn't know the English language, you have a lot of English language learners in Wasadwa,
Right.
the same as we do in Wyoming. Um, and so some people asked what you mentioned that they go to their like block, some of the
Right.
kids go and do, but what kinds of things do you do or strategies or accommodations do you do just in your typical teaching, knowing that you have a lot of language learners?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So they do receive 30 minutes of extra support that mirrors what we're doing in West Ottawa at the elementary level. We use an anthology program called Reading Street for our literacy. I do a different twist on that with a balanced literacy approach to Reading Street, where I have a little bit more freedom there. But so they do get that extra support, but even during math or social studies or things like that, my number one thing is like, I can never assume they understand exactly what I'm saying, and to be aware that I need to break it down into small pieces. I think also as a teacher, you need to utilize what you have. And what I have in my class is a multitude of different language speakers.
Mhm.
And if I can't communicate it, it is okay for them to speak Spanish. It is okay for them to speak Lao. It is okay for them to speak their native language to someone else and communicate what I'm trying to say. I've had um, kids who have lived here their whole life and they just speak Spanish at home, or kids who are brand new newcomers. And so you have to utilize what you have, and then really break the rest down. And we always say in our building, all of our students are English language learners, because even our students who don't speak a foreign language or a language other than English still have had limited exposure to people speaking to them or to books in general. So we stop all the time, and I really build that within our community. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I don't understand what you're saying, or I don't understand what that word means. Or if we read something, we'll break down words. And it's always surprising to me what vocabulary they own and don't own, and how they I use my students a lot to break things down for each other and support each other as language learners.
It's always surprising to me because in the 8th grade, I teach, we have to do vocabulary lists, which is great
Mhm.
because it really does help some of those language learners. But it's interesting when the language learners or even those who like have graduated out of the ELL program will comment Spanish, or we have a variety of African languages too,
Right.
and but especially anyone who speaks like a Germanic or a Romance language can pick out those pieces in the words that they're like,
Mhm.
oh, that's sort of like this, which
Yeah.
means the same thing. And so then they help each other. And I'll see the kids,
Exactly.
who might speak that same language. I'm like, write that down. Write down the word that you would
Mhm.
use in your home language to
Right.
say a similar thing, and then that will help you to remember how to use
Remember.
it, those contexts.
Exactly. I think a big part of it as a teacher is you have to look at it not as a handicap, but as an advantage that they have. And this year, instead of using the Reading Street vocabulary, which I find to be not as helpful, we're doing Greek and Latin roots this year.
Yeah,
And that's been really fun for my Spanish speaking kids, because they're like, oh, well, that root means that exact word. Like we had water words this last time, and mar was in there. So like
yeah.
maritime and things like that. And they're like, well, that means sea. So, I get that. And it's fun for them then to make those connections with English also, and see
And
how
they'll
they're
probably be the quickest ones to pick up on then
Mhm.
how to context clues things,
Yeah,
because they can see those. Suddenly it makes sense that words are built. And
yeah,
I feel like that also helps the kids who, as you said, English is their native language, but they learn something about language
right.
when you talk about it as a class. They learn that all language, especially American English, is connected and woven together to create the words we use right now. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Um, okay, so another question: how do you manage transitions? What do transitions from math to social studies, or coming in from recess or back to lunch? How do you manage transitions with kids this age?
Yeah, so I talked about that a little bit at the beginning when they
Mhm.
transition into school, that we try and make these as peaceful as possible. For myself, I like to, at the beginning of the year, really think to myself, what do I want it to look like? What do they need for each subject? And then how can I, as quickly as possible, get them from point A to point B, because we don't have a lot of extra time. Um, some things that I like to do for transitions are just like that calm, quiet time, coming in from recess, coming in from the bus. Sometimes when we transition from like math to social studies, we might do a quick brain break. Um, right now, my class loves walking with Leslie, walking at home with Leslie. And so we'll walk a mile or two every day in 10-minute chunks to give them a break in between and just kind of burn off a little bit of energy. But really, I would advise like thinking long and hard, like what folders do I want them to have? Where are they going to keep their folders? What do I want that to look like? This year, I'm trying a lot of digital notebooks, which has been great for transitions because they can keep them in Google Classroom. They just open their Chromebook and it's right there for them, and there's no more lost items. Um, yeah, but in fifth grade, it's a lot about teaching responsibility. And I've done all sorts of different things. I've done timers, I've done counting down, I've done race the teacher. You just find every year my students are a little bit different, and different things work for them management wise for those transitions.
Speaking of transitions, what do you do in fifth grade? Maybe it's you personally, or maybe it's a team effort with fifth grade at Parkview. But what sorts of things um, do fifth graders need to do to transition then? Because then they go on to the middle
Yeah.
school for sixth grade in
Right.
West
So I
Iowa.
think that's one thing that's really unique about teaching fifth grade at in an elementary school. We always say we kind of don't fit there.
Hmm.
Um, they, I think fifth and sixth grade really benefits from their own building, but we do a lot, or I do in my classroom, a lot with Chromebooks and responsible Chromebook usage, and learning how to navigate Google Classroom. They are one-to-one in our district at the secondary level. And so there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of things that they need to keep track of Chromebook wise as they get older. And my whole year, my mentality is, how can I make them as successful as possible at the secondary level, because most of my students have the deck stacked against them already. And so
Hmm.
my goal is, how can I remove as many barriers as possible for them? I'm not a big advocate for like putting kids up on stepping stools to see over the fence, like that model.
Yeah.
I more like, how can we take that fence down
Yep.
so that they don't have that barrier in the way for them anymore. So I do think for anybody who ends up teaching fifth grade, it's really important to, um, I've emailed the middle school media specialist before when I had a question about things like that, and just really utilizing your resources that you have. What will they need to be able to do when they go to middle school is a great question to ask. And the middle school where I am is always really happy to answer those questions for us. But fifth grade is a big year of like filling any gaps that they have, um, pushing those kids that I think would benefit from more advanced coursework the next year, and then getting the kids who might be a little bit behind up to where they need to be successful in sixth grade, and just really teaching a lot of responsibility, taking care of your own things. I think every day I say about 100 times, man, that's a bummer. What are you going to do about that problem? How are you going to handle that? And it's kind of shocking to them at first, like, what, you're not going to fix my problem for me? How are you going to fix that? And they really like just teaching them to be their own advocate, and how to advocate for other people too, and be helpers in the world.
Yeah. It's interesting because my own kids are in Zealand, so fifth grade is the top
Right.
before middle school here. But in Wyoming, we have a fifth, sixth grade building.
Right.
It's going to be, I'll be interested to find out. I was going to ask some of my my own kids, Eddie's teachers. I wonder if they're seeing the current sixth graders not as prepared as in the future because they lost that month of those 2-3 months of preparation last year at the end, where it kicks in a lot into middle school mode in those. It'll be interesting.
I had said that to Troy just a couple months ago. Like, I was really sad to lose my students in March like that, because that March to June period is really when they, like, it all comes together for them, where they're like, I can do things for myself. I'm the boss of myself. I can, you know, figure things out. And so they kind of like, they learned all of it, but they didn't have a lot of time to like utilize all of it. So
Right.
sure, it's been a big adjustment for.
And I think it's a big adjustment from fifth to sixth, because they go from, most kids go from self-contained, or at least only seeing 2 teachers a day, to traveling around to different classes. It's not as big of a transition from like 8th to 9th usually. But yeah, 5th to 6th is one of the biggest transitions, I think, other than starting kindergarten, you know.
Probably, yeah.
Or kindergarten to first, right. Okay, so because I like to keep these, honor everybody's time here, a couple more questions. One, what is the most challenging thing about being a 5th grade teacher for you?
Meeting everybody's needs, and then also meeting my own needs. So kind of like finding that balance between making sure all my students' needs are being met, and then still like that I'm okay. Because I think those of us who go into teaching, we care about people a lot and we want to meet their needs, but we have to remember to meet our own needs and those of our families. So that's something in the last couple of years that I've really started to do, is like leave and done at the end of the day. I do have like an open policy with parents. They can email me and I will try to get back to them, even if it's 8:00 at night. But I need to leave like my worries and concerns for students at the end of the day as much as possible. And on Friday, like my weekend needs to be for me and not for grading as much as possible. So, you know, one piece of advice is, if your district, you know, it depends on what your district expectations are, but I don't grade every paper that my students hand me. Sometimes we're doing something for practice and to get better at what we're doing and to grow for ourselves. I don't need to put a pen to paper for every single thing they hand me. I'll take it for accountability's sake. But that's one thing I like this year, that I'm using a reading identity notebook, a writing notebook, because then they're still keeping track of their learning and growing, but it's taking a lot of paperwork off my plate, and I can still check on what they're doing and respond to them in their notebooks. But give yourself a break. And when you do that, you give your students a break too. And I've seen more growth in my students' learning when they are finding joy in their own reading and their own writing and their own math success and their own social studies interests and science interests. Like, it's okay to learn for the joy of learning.
Yeah. I've done that a lot. I've done that this year too. I used to take a bell ringer sheet at the end of every week and grade it. And now I just have them do it in their notebook, and I don't take it up for a grade at all. But they all do it because they're going to share out afterwards. So it's still, but I don't take it as a grade. Everybody wants to know, since we're doing writing, talking about a lot of writing, what does writing look like in your class? And do you have a favorite writing project or something you do in 5th grade?
So, writing is one thing that I'm always striving to do better at. It's hard because you want kids to get feedback from you and you want to conference with kids, but you don't want to crush their spirit either. especially at the 5th grade age, we're trying to push them beyond, like in 1st grade, they could write, I have a cat. My cat's name is Joe. My cat is fun to play with. And that's an A, that's a great piece of writing. And just to grow them beyond that is tricky. So for myself, as a West Ottawa teacher, my writing is based in Reading Street. If I follow Reading Street the way that it's written, which I did for 2 years as a beginning teacher, just to learn like where are we going? What are they picturing this to be? Students produced a writing piece every week. There is some value in that they are seeing a piece to the end in a short amount of time, because most writing we do needs to be done relatively quickly. We don't have 3 months to write a personal narrative typically. So our writing in Reading Street is connected to our story of the week. And in 5th grade Reading Street, a lot of the topics are social emotional related. So for example, right now we're starting a personal narrative unit, and we started with, what is a narrative? How do you tell a story? We looked at some photographs and things like that. A photo can tell a story. We did 6-word memoirs, which I know you do too. And those were awesome, and they're hanging in the hall, and the teachers love seeing those. And now we're moving into like just telling a story about when we overcame a challenge in our own life. So I enjoy doing that because I learn a lot about my students through that piece of writing. But I also really like to tie another piece of writing I do later in the year is cause and effect. And we tie that to our social studies curriculum with the causes of the American Revolution. So I like to do, a lot of different things. I try every quarter to do a narrative, an informational piece, and an opinion piece for a grade that we bring from beginning to end. So we do a lot of writing pieces that are longer, but I also try to write in every subject so that they see that they're writing all the time. We write in math, we write in social studies, we write in science, we write during writing, we write about what we read. So just getting them as much as possible to write it so that we get volume is, I think, like the biggest problem in 5th grade is like that volume.
Yeah, because you're trying to build stamina.
More.
Yeah, you're trying to build stamina, but it's a lot. I know. All right, so I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing about 5th grade?
They're funny and they like my jokes. They're funny. Like they're just becoming like real human beings at that age where they're cool. Like I love 5th graders. They're awesome humans, and they understand like what is fair and what is not fair, and they're figuring out like, what do I believe, what do I stand for, but yet they're just like so awkward and goofy, and it keeps me young and fun. So yeah, I just think they're cool humans at that age.
And the most passionate teachers, I think, love the age group that they're in when they're in it. Because when I taught seniors, I loved it. And I thought, when I moved down to 8th grade, but now I could not imagine teaching any other grade because I love their just dorkiness.
Yep.
So everybody always wants to know, what piece of advice, I think you and next week are my 2 newest teachers to teaching.
Okay.
So what kind of advice, you're still kind of close to the beginning yet, what things maybe do you wish that you had known going in, although you've been working in education for a long time, but what kinds of things do you wish that you had either known or that you would tell a new teacher in your building, like advice wise?
Ask questions. Don't put all the pressure on yourself. Use the resources your district has, and then build your own resources. So like things that have been really valuable to me have been just like widening my learning community as much as possible. So build a personal learning community on Twitter for yourself, on Facebook for yourself if you're a Facebook user, Instagram if you use Instagram. I'm a Twitter person for my PLC mostly. I've gotten so many ideas and resources that way, and been able to ask questions and reach out, to people that I think are really interesting. Follow authors on there too, and just the things that I'm passionate about that would make me a better teacher. We have coaches who I can invite to come and watch me teach anytime or talk to them about anything. And I think sometimes people are nervous to do that, but why not? Like, they're there to help you. And I've always been encouraged through that process to be better. And just utilize people as much as you can. If I'm doing something that I think is cool, I'll take it to my principal and say, like, hey, look at I'm doing this. What do you think? And that's often been to my benefit, because then they'll say, well, why don't you try this and this? And I know I'm not supposed to tell you when your observation is, but I'd love to see you teach that. And so, if you're struggling, reach out to other teachers in your building. That would be a big piece of advice. And my other piece of advice is don't be a complainer.
That's a good one. Nobody likes a complaint.
For 2 reasons. It doesn't help you teach better to complain. And also, you never know. As much as we want to trust everyone in the world, you never know who's going to repeat what you said to someone else, who will then pass it on. So if you complain, take it home and complain.
That is a big one.
Don't complain.
In any district that I've been remotely involved in, that is a huge one. The complainers are not the people that anyone wants to work with.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, thank you. Any last thoughts? Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a journey for me, and I'm glad that I stuck with it. There were times I wanted to give up, and I'm glad that I stuck with it, and I love it. So hopefully it will be the same for everyone who's watching.
Yay. All right. I'm going to stop recording, but just hold on a second. All right.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to do your response.